Hello, everyone. I am really excited for this session, and I want to thank everyone, first of all, to participate in this. And I would really love to share what I have been learning so far, working on the AI projects recently. So, let me get started with my introduction. All right. So, as you probably now know, that I'm Kushali and I am a senior UX designer at Amazon. I've been working into the UX design field for over 15 years now, and I recently got an opportunity to work on AI projects, project end to end. So I thought this will be good to share my experience about how it changed the design process a little bit because to be honest, when I was getting started on this project, I didn't find a lot of resources. I was kind of like trying to see how can I get started, right? How is the design process different when you're working on AI products? But I didn't actually get a lot of things, although I started reading some of the books, taking some online courses. So I thought it'll be really good to just kind of share my journey and what are some tips that you could use in your design process. So coming to the agenda, I'll be first talking about why we are having this session. I talked a little bit about it already, but yes, I would like to deep dive a little bit on it so you know the goal of this. I would also kind of go into the definition of AI UX design, although it's not accurate, but I think it's just how I'm seeing AI influencing the UX design. And then we'll dive into the design thinking for AI products. At the end of it, we don't want to miss out like how do we measure the success when we have designed something. So we'll get into that as well, and then we can take questions as well. But if there are any questions in between as well, feel free to shoot them to us. All right. So, why are we doing this presentation? So, as I was saying, when I was getting started on the AI project, I didn't find a lot of resources about the UX design as such. So, I was kind of like hunching for the information all over the places, right? And then I wanted to do it the right way for my very first project. So, I think I would really like to share my experience based on those learnings. I also realized that since the technology itself is really coming into play with full force and power. Everybody is kind of now talking about the AI strengths, right? Like where we can use it, its weaknesses. But then, for the decades, whenever we have seen, right, the technology comes in, it's driven by the technologies, right? And we kind of like forget the human element. Um, it is kind of like an afterthought, right? So I think it's easy, even in this scenario, that we kind of focus on the technology more, but then we kind of forget about the emotions of the people here, right? Like, how can we make the human element important here? And that's where the UX design comes in, right? Like, our role as a UX designer, keep reminding how much it is important to not forget UX design, and we have to go with the AI being in full force, fast pace, we have to just like go along with this technology. Um, and I would like to share the tips on this, going over the design process, so that you and all of us, right, we can design with confidence. So my personal opinion is that there will be an increased significance of UX design with this technology. All right, so now let's talk about the UX design, right? So as designers, we all know that at a high level, this is the diagram from Jesse James, Garrett's elements of user experience design. So at a high level, like he put in 5 elements. Although this is not like the complete picture, but still, like this is the best that which applies for any product in real life, right? So it kind of like talks about the scope where we talk about what is the goal of the website or the product that you're working on, right? And then we start going into the actual specification, the requirements of that particular product, and then we get into the interaction design, basically trying to define what are the task flows, the customer workflows, and so on. And then we start defining the components that will help to achieve those task flows. And then the last layer is kind of like that visual design, right, where we talk about how would that finished product look like. So far our understanding for UX design has been like these 5 layers kind of like do a good job on what we have been doing right now. With the introduction of AI in UX design, most often we are kind of designing in probabilistic system, right? Like there are deterministic system. We have been working in that scenario already. So I'll be talking about the probabilistic system where the input of the product is kind of random. At the same time, the output is also like it is like something that needs to be predicted, right? So it is also the system itself is dynamic here. So I think it really changes the way we look at UX design now. The products we had been working were kind of like doing what we tell it to do, right? Which is what the deterministic systems are kind of. There are AI products which are deterministic, they are probabilistic as well. Most often they will be probabilistic because that is where the power of AI kind of can be seen, right? So I guess with the introduction of AI UX design, I want to point out that there are multiple layers now that gets added, right? And starting from system, how the system is built, that is something we as UX designer would want to know, right? Like how the system itself is built. What I mean by that is that the data that is being used to kind of train the AI model here, we want to know the algorithm of the AI itself, how it is working, what kind of algorithm it is using, what kind of output that model is going to generate, and then the human interaction again, right? Like how is the customer going to use the product, how is the customer going to react to the product. So there are a lot of things that come into play. And in this scenario now, these 5 layers actually get added to each of these stages of the current UX design diagram that we just saw, right? So I think mostly I personally feel that they are kind of part of the business objectives. They kind of add to the functional requirements. At every stage of these layers, the interaction design, the information architecture, we have to keep looking at these additional 5 layers, which are going to guide our user experience. Um, okay, now I want to get into the design thinking for the AI products. So we saw what that model looks like. Now I want to talk about some of the examples and the process itself that we can use to design AI products. So I'll be talking about understanding the data. So I talked about understanding the system, the data, and the model. So this is where I want to go into a little bit deeper to kind of like share what does it mean to understand the data. And then once we have an understanding of the data itself, also think about the phases that the AI feature itself can have. And the journey mapping, which we as designers we kind of already do, but then for this AI product, how is it going to be different? Doing the design itself, and then how earning trust is actually even more important with the AI coming into picture, and then evaluating the AI experience that we have designed. So I'll be talking about each of these topics now in the design thinking. All right. So understanding the data, how we as designers can now participate in the proof of concept, right? So when we kind of start, or any company kind of starts an AI product, they may have an engineering team who is kind of doing this hard job, right, of training the model. They are kind of like gathering all the data first of all to train that model. So I think in this stage, it's really important for us to be part of that. Although we may not be doing the training piece of it, but we just want to make sure that we understand how much of the data is being used, how is that data, what parameters have been considered. So once we have an understanding of data that is being used to train the model, then we know the system really better. We can understand the output as well, right? So I think once you have gotten an understanding of the outputs, we kind of now also understand the success rate of the output, right? What's the accuracy, how much, how often the system is actually giving us an accurate response. So I think once we have that understanding, then it will really help us to put the AI product into different stages, right? If the data is not good enough, then the product itself is um, not so mature enough to put really with a confidence that this is a product you can give full level of autonomy. I think if the data is something that needs to be improved over the time, then the onboarding experience itself is really different. So that's why understanding data is really important here. At the same time, the performance, how much time the system really takes in kind of responding. And then again, like just trying to understand if the data isn't good, do we have enough time to kind of improvise the model before we launch, right? So if we have enough time, again, the design kind of changes. So that's why understanding the data is really important. I want to kind of talk about the examples here. In 2011, IBM came up with this concept of Watson, which was kind of like trying to help in the healthcare industry, right? So Watson was basically focused on the oncology. So the idea was that this product will really help the oncologist to give recommendations about cures for the cancer, right? So they had a really great goal in mind, and I think they saw an opportunity here. And I think it was a great effort from their end. They kind of already spent like $5 billion to gather data from different sectors into insurance, like companies who were having the imaging details. They also kind of tied up with the oncologist experts. So they did a lot of good job on gathering data from various industries, and they started to train the model. Around 2017, when they actually partnered with a cancer center in Texas, they started to realize that the product is failing, right? So now, what really went wrong in this scenario? The thing was that the data that was being used was kind of biased, right? So it was a data from, let's say, a specific geography. And if let's say the data is used from New York, and then you try to apply it to population in China, then the cure really differs, right? Because the people are different. So what happened was that the recommendation that it was giving was not really relevant to the people. So the experts, the oncologist experts, started to kind of feel that it's not giving the right information. So the product really failed. So now, why am I giving this example? It's to kind of make you all like see the value of the data itself, and how can designer come into play into very beginning to kind of try to understand the outputs themselves, trying to understand how much data we have fed in. Is there a possibility of bias here? So the data itself needs to be good enough. Another example is from Microsoft. It was a Twitter bot that they had created. I think the goal here was that this will have a very positive conversation with people. But I think this product also, within 16 hours of like deployment, it kind of like failed, because the algorithm that they had used was such that the chatbot, not chatbot, but the bot, which was on Twitter, it will learn after communicating with people, right? So as you communicate with it, it's kind of like a reinforcement learning. So you kind of talk with it, it kind of learns from that data, and then it will talk to you. So I think what had happened was that because it was in social media, a lot of people started to train the bot, it started to game the bot, and then it started to learn the bad things, and this started to like post a vulnerable post, right? So I think this was another example to kind of just show you how the data is and the algorithm is important. And we as designer, when we start asking these questions, we can raise these concerns very early on the stages. Um, all right. So now let's go into the AI feature phases, which is our second topic, right? So now once we have understood the data itself, how good that data is, then we want to break it into three phases. As such, for example, the onboarding. So if the data itself, if we know that the product is going to have a good enough data, it's going to be a very strong product, then we can give it a lot of autonomy. But then the data itself is such that we need inputs from customers to train it, then the level of autonomy is not really high. We might need to kind of give a lot of control to people when the customers are getting started, right? So what would that onboarding experience look like for this AI feature? We might need to also think about the level of intervention, how often the people will need to intervene, right? For example, if the customer are using a product to kind of review the content that the AI has generated, so then we might want to have an approval process, right, before it actually gets to the end users. So I think we have to think about the level of intervention here while the product is in use. And then once the usage has been done, if there is a reinforcement learning that we have in the product, then we might also want to consider having a way for the customers to give feedback based on which the model can again use that data to learn. So I think there are these three stages that we might need to consider when we are designing that particular AI feature itself. Based on McKinsey Global Institute's analysis on 400 use cases across 19 industries, this was an analysis that was done, and they kind of found out that more than two-thirds of the opportunities to use AI were in improving the existing flows, right? Not actually creating a complete new AI flow, but it was within the existing flows. So I think in this whole presentation, and my experience was also to improve an existing flow that we had, right? But then there were about 16% use cases which needed entirely new workflows. So I think, but in any case, the design thinking process that we are going over will apply in both these scenarios. I just wanted to call that out, that the majority of the experience as of now might focus on like improving the existing flows. Um, Now let's get into the journey mapping. So I'm sure you all might have done the journey mapping in your design process. There is nothing to read on the right side. I just put an image so that you know that the journey mapping is still important when it comes to AI. It's actually even more important because now we want to, since we are talking about improving the existing flows for most often scenarios, we want to have this journey map as a reference to kind of compare how did we improve the flow with AI being there. Did it actually improve, or are the customers spending a ton of time just like figuring out what just happened, right? So we want to really compare the before and after, and our journey map is kind of reference for that, right? um, Once we have created the journey map in our design process, we might want to kind of keep updating this journey map with the new data that we discover, right? So if the model is getting trained really well, you might have a beta. After the beta, the product is actually really good because now it got more data. So then, this journey map might even change because now the onboarding experience might not really need that many steps to just kind of train this particular product, right? You're just like having a good level of autonomy in that product. So again, the journey map kind of changes. Even the opportunities, right? At every touch point that we add in the journey map, the touch point will really help us to see how the AI can now fill this gap, right? So we might need to keep updating that as well. So I just wanted to call that out, that the journey mapping is even more important with the AI products. Um, okay, now going into the probabilistic system design, as I was saying, right, like the now we might be working most often with this kind of system where the inputs are random, the output is going to be something that we might not know as well. So in this dynamic system, it really makes sense to start with the data instead of Figma, right? Because Now the data is the meat of everything. So we really want to understand the data. We might also kind of want to start with a spreadsheet, where we have the input to output mapping. So we just want to understand the data first. Once we have the data, we kind of start to know what are the data variances, right? What are the scenarios we might run into? Maybe there is a situation where there is no prediction, or maybe there is a situation where the prediction is not good enough, right? It's bad. Or maybe the prediction is completely wrong. So I think there are various scenarios that we might want to run into. And I think we as designers would really want to now capture those data variances in our designs. I would also kind of like encourage all of us to kind of participate in the back testing. And what I mean by that is, for example, you have this example, right, which is to um, see the pricing of the house, right? So this AI, which kind of like determines the estimated price of an house, will have a lot of parameters, right? So based on, like, let's say the location, our budget, it's comparing the pricing of the nearby homes, and so on. So it might have a lot of different data that it could be using. But I think what might be very helpful is that back testing, which is to kind of go into the historical data. Maybe in this scenario, we take the last time the home was sold, and now play around with this our AI product, and kind of try to see whether the using the historical data, whether its prediction in that timeline when it was last sold, is it actually matching with the pricing that it was actually sold for, right? So that is what I mean by backtesting. And now this kind of thing will really help us understand the accuracy of the model itself. So we as designer, we will just be closely working with engineering to kind of like do this, right? um, Okay, and then lastly, I want to cover the earned trust part of the product. So we want to really allow customers to do experimentation with the AI product because AI is really new. We want to allow customers to have more control, right? When we launch this, we want to also make sure that the AI is not really posing any risk in the real world scenario. For example, the IBM Watson scenario, even that had some level of risk because it was kind of like showing the cancer recommendation for the cure, but still it was in hands of the oncologist experts, right? So we might want to really think about where we are putting the AI. It shouldn't be that it just like breaks anybody's production databases or whatever you're working in, right? So we just have to think about that. We also want to participate in the pricing model here. In my project that I recently worked on, I was kind of closely working with the product managers to have this conversation, because if we just like come up with a pricing model that is like, let's say, flat, right, but then the customer is actually not knowing what the AI is going to do, how the output is going to look like, then we might want to consider scenarios where they kind of like use maybe it for like free for some time, and then kind of when they earn the trust, then they start actually using the product, right? So I think as a designer, it's really important to again participate in this kind of conversation, so that it's not impacting the customer experience. Give control to the customer, I kind of like already talked about, and then also give them flexibility to kind of turn on or off this feature as needed. We don't want to force them to use AI. We also want to get feedback from customers, how their experience was after using the product. And then I think what might help with earning trust is that since AI could take time to kind of show the results, it can take a little bit of, let's say, few months or so. It might really help to have a way to show some kind of reporting to the customers where they can see the value of AI outcomes. They can compare, okay, now the AI is actually giving me this output, it's actually better than what I was doing before. So I think that would really help the customers to see the value. um, I think the Air Canada example, this was another example of failure where the Air Canada actually used a chatbot to kind of like give a wrong information. There was a customer trying to understand if there is a discount that they can avail. The chatbot kind of told them yes, they can. And then when they went out to the customer support to actually get the refund, they denied it, right? So this was a scenario where the trust was actually broken here, right? And the Air Canada then kind of like apologized. They maybe paid back to the customer, but again, like it is really important to kind of see these scenarios upfront so that the customers don't lose trust on the product. Now, evaluating the AI experience, I think this might be really helpful. We have seen a lot of examples now. So I just kind of like want to talk about this for a bit, that it's important in this scenario to see how the product is doing before the launch. So as a designer, I would encourage to kind of like have beta launches, maybe multiple ones if needed, to see how the customers are reacting to it, how the AI is actually helping customers. Also define the telemetry from the product usage along with the qualitative feedback. So this will really help us see how the customer is reacting to it. At the same time, I would say the feedback on the data is critical in this scenario rather than just the interaction. The spreadsheet that we had created, maybe to understand the data, maybe that is something we show to the customers, right? Get feedback on that. We might also do A/B testing if with multiple versions if needed to kind of see the positive and negative impact of the feature that we launched. And lastly, measuring the success. As I was kind of like sharing that the AI product could really take time to show the value to the customer. So in this scenario, we might need to be patient enough to see the outcomes. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so we might need to be patient enough to actually see the expected outcomes. The adoption rate, as compared to what we have been working on, we could be expecting the adoption rate, but then in case of AI, it could be really unexpected, and we might see some time because the AI itself takes time in learning and in showing accurate results, right? So it could take time to see the adoption rate as per our expectation. The customer it themselves will need time to get confidence on the product. So I would say that track the same telemetry over the time and then compare, are we doing good? So that's my tip on that. And then based on that, our designs would need to be traded as the product gets better. So I think that was mostly about measuring success. And I just want to thank you, everyone. I would like to take any questions if there are. I know we are almost at time.
Hi, thank you for that. I have actually loads of questions that I could ask, because one of the biggest challenges I find is how do you uncover all of the different scenarios when you're dealing with a probabilistic system, and you don't know that 9 out of 10 times it's going to answer correctly, but one time it doesn't.
Yeah, true. I think that's a great question. I guess like when I was working on the product, I was kind of asking the engineers to kind of give me the real data. So I wasn't like in my mockups, I wouldn't put just a lot of ipsum. I think that's like our enemy in this scenario. So I would just like first of all try, like we have couple categories already, right? So we could think of the error scenarios, the no data scenarios, the prediction going bad, right? So we already have some scenarios. So trying to get data from the engineers, the real data, and then I kind of like try to define the user experience, right? So from the engineering, if we just like put on them, they might just like come up with an outcome that we as designers might want to change it a bit. So I think I was just working very closely with the engineering team and kind of like having these categories of which I already had in mind. And then I would ask the engineering team that, hey, are there any scenarios that I am not covering in my designs? So they might just give me more categories to add. And then I would just like revise the messaging that we want to show to the customer. So I think the data was really important. Just like having those categories in mind and on the designs was really important.
Brilliant. Now, it's a great example of where kind of if it was segmented, you wouldn't be able to get as good a product. So having to work closer
Yeah.
together
Uh-huh.
is the success. We're actually over time now, so I just want to thank you once again for a great talk. I hope it was exciting and interesting for everybody out there as well as for me.
Thank you.